Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is May and I'm a vet that recently graduated from University of Cambridge. And today I have Jessica with me. You might know her as Nutrition RVN. She has an amazing blog and Instagram where she debunks pet food myths and talks about nutrition. So we'll start with introductions. Can you tell us a little bit about your qualifications, your background?
Yeah, so my name's Jessica, and as May said, I do nutritional consultations and blogs online. I have a bachelor in animal and veterinary bioscience, which is where my background in animal nutrition came from. Throughout that course, I studied a lot about animal welfare, animal health, physiology, biochemistry, and nutrition. So nutrition was my main sort of major that I came out of the course with. That was a pre-veterinary degree. So some people go on to be a vet afterwards. I instead went off and became a registered vet nurse. So I'm a registered vet nurse as well as an animal nutritionist, and I kind of merged the two in my day-to-day work as well as my Nutrition RVN blogs.
That's really cool. Are there many people who go down that route, or is this something that you just decided to do?
Yeah, it's not sort of the traditional route for sure. I would definitely say it's quite different. Most people will, particularly in Australia where I'm based, they'll come either straight out of high school and go into vet nursing, or they will leave high school early and go into vet nursing. So for me, I was already working in the industry for 10 years prior to doing my vet nursing degree.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I had already sort of done a little bit of vet nursing and had the hands-on experience already. So that was why I sort of ended up diverting off from the pre-vet path to go on to vet nursing instead, mainly because I sort of discovered along the way that I was like, oh, this is a bit more targeted to what I enjoy and what I like to do, compared to a vet degree where it was sort of, I suppose, excluding the things that I enjoyed.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. So I just graduated from vet school and I feel a little bit very inexperienced actually to approach like a nutrition consult. So maybe you could, for the benefit of vets and also pet owners, especially, the puppy pandemic that has been happening this past few months, everybody's got a new dog, be it a puppy or like an adult dog. So how would you go about giving advice to these owners who have never had a dog and, they want to do the best for their dog? And I guess the idea is not to, just recommend them a specific food, but like empower them with the information so they can make the decisions themselves and be like, okay, I know what I'm reading when I'm reading a pet food label, for example.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's always in the back of my mind is when I'm talking to clients, I always want to make them feel empowered to make that choice. Like you said, I don't want to just be like, this is the food you feed, see you later. It's always comes with that. Yeah. So I always tell vets to open the discussion, and I also myself open the discussion in the same way, which is just, what are you feeding? And sometimes they'll just give me a bland answer like dry food, wet food. So I'll go a bit further and what brand is it? Or, if you're home cooking, what's involved in that? What's your recipe that you're following? And then from there, that's already started me on the conversation of what their philosophy is. And then I start to ask more questions about that. What are your beliefs around nutrition? What are the things that are important to you in a pet food? And also what goals you have for your own pet. So that is going to shape their choices, but it's also going to shape your recommendation as well. Because obviously, if you know that someone is, dead set against a particular type of food, you're probably not going to recommend that food. And if you do, you're probably going to turn them off wanting to speak any further about nutrition with you. And then, like you were saying, with the education side of things, I've always been taught that you have to kind of figure out what way that your client learns. So every client learns and understands things in a different way. For me, I love getting written material. I read something and it will go in my head and I will never forget it. Whereas other people, other people are very visual learners. So some clients, I could talk to the ends of the earth to them and they're not going to be interested. But if I come over and I show them the bag, or I try and build a relationship with that actual product with them, then they're more likely to purchase it. So it takes a little bit of time to build that, but that's all part of building that consultation relationship that vets already have that skill with anyway. But once you figure that out, then you can kind of educate them in a way that they understand. So if a client is like me, where they love written stuff, I always have heaps and heaps of handouts stored up. And then those are the handouts that are my go-to to explain things, like you said, like different myths or things that they're not sure about, or things that they want to be able to understand when they pick up a bag.
Because especially like in vet school, we've been told that, you know, kibbles, like dry food or wet food that has been manufactured with all the minerals and vitamins and nutrients in mind would be better than home cooked food. And there's a lot of risks with, you know, doing home cooked food, because you got to make sure that you get the recipe right. So like, how would you kind of advise that to the owner to get them to know the importance of it?
I explain to clients that, you know, if you think about how we eat and how pets eat, it's very, very different. And unfortunately, with home cooking, clients tend to try and apply human nutrition to their patient. And I just explain to them that animals have very, very different nutrient requirements than we do. We can eat a varied diet and get balance. Pets can't eat a varied diet and get balance. Because when they do try and form that, you know, balanced over time sort of mentality where they're mixing and matching foods, what tends to happen is you'll be missing one or more nutrient, whichever way you do that. So the patient is never getting the same thing every time and never getting the same nutrients every time. So essentially those nutrient deficiencies, they just line up over time, and then they're always deficient in something. Whereas with humans, we generally don't have that same level of issue when we mix and match, partly because our food is just as fortified as pet food. A lot of our food has actually got nutrients added. You know, milk doesn't normally have the amount of calcium that milk actually has in it now, because we add nutrients to that. And also a lot of people will take multivitamins, which is for that reason, to kind of try and fill those gaps. If they're trying to home cook for their patient, that's fine, but they have to stick to that recipe that they've been given or that they've had formulated for them by someone who is qualified. I do also sometimes show people, you know, if they are interested, they can go onto balanceit.com and they can run their recipe through the actual program and see what the deficiencies are. Because the most common problem I see with home cooked diets is clients are excluding the nutrient supplement, which is actually the most important part. So I just explain to them the importance of that.
What is the nutrient supplement?
So normally when you have a balanced diet, the main thing that's usually missing is calcium, calcium phosphorus. That's usually the main thing that's missing out of a home cooked diet. So essentially it's all of those trace minerals that you won't get in your recipe that then they add in a balancer, which makes sure that you've got everything that they need. So after all the cooking process and everything like that, you add a supplement at the end, which makes sure that everything is balanced and in line. Because again, nutrients change as you cook them. Some will be lost, some will be gained. So
I guess the fact that with home cooked, you can't really measure it because you don't have, you know, the equipment to measure the nutrient levels. It's sort of like easier to just feed dry food or wet food that has the guaranteed, is it called guaranteed analysis? I don't know, I might be mixing my terms up.
So look, guaranteed analysis, I suppose you're on the right track. With pet food, they actually test the raw nutrients and then they also test afterwards. Well, good companies do anyway. They test the final formulation. So that's how they know what's missing or what's deficient in the diet, and then that's when they add their minerals and vitamins at the end. They don't add minerals and vitamins before, because then they get lost in the cooking process.
Okay, let's say I am a new pet owner, and what were the main things that you would ask me to look out for when purchasing pet food?
So I always teach people about the WASAVA guidelines, if you've ever heard of those.
Okay. Yeah.
So so they're basically a list of 10 questions that you should be asking your manufacturer. You don't necessarily have to ask them directly, but a lot of the time the information that is on that list is available on their website, or you can directly ask them, or you can also check out Pet Nutrition Alliance, which has a tool that lists all of the companies and how they've answered those questions. The main things that I tell people to watch for is, are they qualified? Like who is actually formulating the diet? Is it someone who is just a pet owner, or is it someone who actually knows about nutrition who has a qualification. The other thing is quality control and testing is very important to me, and it should be very important to clients as well. So what is that company doing when it comes to research and testing their diets for safety? So those are the main things that I tell people to worry about.
Is there anything else that you would advise, or have we pretty much covered that topic?
It depends on the patient, but I usually explain to people the risks associated with raw diets, grain-free diets, all of those things that are not, not commercial diets, things that they should watch out for if they are wanting to feed that way. Because obviously the assessment that you're going to do with cassava is going to be slightly different for something that is not a commercial diet, because obviously they're not going to tick any of those boxes.
So yeah, I guess we can talk a little bit about what are the dangers of grain-free diets and raw food diets.
Yeah,
that is very controversial. There's loads of debates online and people just get lost, and there's so much misinformation. But
yeah, look, with the with grain-free, I tell everyone to sort of start from, say, go on the FDA website and have a read of the grain-free advisory that was put up there, because that is basically the summary of all of the information that's been done and all of the studies that have been done. Unfortunately, I get a lot of clients that will come to me and say, I read something on the internet about grain-free and it's really good. And I'll sort of say, have you read the FDA advisory? And they're like, what? So again, giving people the resources that are reliable resources, because people tend to sort of find stuff on Facebook or, social media, and they'll just run with that. And then with raw, again, like you said, it's a massive debate. The thing is that there's not a whole lot of scientific evidence to confirm the benefits that a lot of raw feeders promote. There are some benefits, which some of them being the fact that it's kind of a minimally supplemented diet. So for some patients that may have issues with certain ingredients or proteins, it might be slightly better for them. But then there's always the bacterial risks that you have to be aware of, because again, depending on where you're getting your meat from and how it's been processed, or if it's even been processed, if it's been frozen or freeze dried or anything like that, you just have to take that into account, that there's always going to be a level of risk if you're feeding that sort of diet, and you should be aware of that risk.
Also, because I know there's some studies that have shown that, especially in pregnant dogs, if you feed them raw diet, and then once they give birth and then during whelping, they can pass those bacteria to the puppies who are not very so who don't have good immune systems, because they haven't formed all the antibodies and things. So it just sounds like a very dangerous risk that I feel like people should really be aware of it, so they can make better choices. But to give them the advice in a way that you don't start a fight, but you want them to be on your page.
Exactly. And that's what I always explain to people, that I'm not here to have a fight with you about it. If you want to feed that way, that's fine, but just be aware that you do have to still have some level of responsibility about the fact that this could cause a problem either now or down the track for you or your pet or your family, or even you bring the dog to the vet, you bring the dog to your groomer, you bring the dog to all these different people. So you've kind of got to have that level of responsibility too, that you could potentially be passing on something to these people. It's not necessarily just, oh, my dog can handle it. But can anyone else that it comes in contact with, So
also, I thought about another thing. So I watched some of your talks with Kat the vet and other talks online. So when you're feeding a dog, you mentioned that you have to feed them according to their specific life stage. So could you explain a little bit more about the importance of that?
So the only reason I say to avoid all life stages foods is because basically in all life stages food is designed to be for the most demanding life stage. So what that means is it's meant to meet the life stage requirements of a puppy and during gestation and lactation, which, as we know, are the highest energy times of the life of that pet. So basically what that means is that the fat levels and the protein levels of an all life stages diet is going to be very, very high. Now, even though it's called all life stages, it's technically really just a growth diet. But because it's meeting the highest requirements, everything else is covered, if that makes sense. If you're feeding that to a pet that has lower requirements, like a senior or an adult, you're exceeding those requirements. So potentially you're causing weight gain, potentially you're affecting other organs that don't need that high level protein. It causes other issues. Now, with the life stages profiles, they're basically based on a set of guidelines that are created by the American Feed Control Officials, so AAFCO. And they create AAFCO, so they have nutrient profiles that manufacturers build their foods based off, and usually they're just kind of minimum levels, so companies can either meet or exceed those requirements. So sometimes you'll see on the back of the bag, it's called an adequacy statement, which basically means it's been checked that it's adequate for that food, for that life stage.
Okay.
So it'll say something like, this food is formulated to meet the requirements for adult maintenance based on the AAFCO nutrient profiles. So that's a diet that's been built just to match those requirements. You can also say something about feeding trials, which means it's been fed to about 6 dogs for a period of about 6 months and just checked that it didn't kill them, really. It's kind of the bare minimum. It's really just to check that it didn't affect their bloods, it didn't make them gain too much weight, and they didn't get sick. So, and that's one way of confirming that it is suitable for that life stage.
Okay. So I guess another thing to look out for in packaging is the AAFCO statements, as you said.
Yeah, so those AAFCO statements basically just tell you that it's complete and balanced for that particular age of your pet. So any commercial food has to have that to actually sell its food in a store. But again, it's a minimum requirement. So, you know.
What is the best way to make sure that the food is good for your dog? Like, is there a way that we can measure in our own pets?
Yeah, so again, it really comes down to, again, what your nutrient goals are for your pet, and also if, you know, basically that you're feeding the right food for them. So if you do have an adult puppy, an adult, just feed it adult food, right? Don't feed it something that's going to exceed their requirements, because it's only going to cause issues. If you have a puppy, feed a growth diet. Don't feed an adult food. It's quite, that's kind of the bare minimum. And then, like I said, then the next things are what your nutritional goals are. So if you want your pet to have a really shiny coat, or you've got a very, very active performance dog, feed a performance diet. So just choose things that are very, very specific rather than generalized.
Is there like a specific food that you can feed for a shinier coat?
So I suppose it's more so like ingredients that are in specific diets. So some diets, they're called like skin diets or something like that. So they may actually be built for a shinier coat. But then other diets may say this improves coat condition or something, because it's got a level of essential fatty acids or oils that will come out into the skin and moisturize the coat. So there are things that they can do, but again, like I said, look for something that's kind of targeted, because usually it is generally what it's saying it does do.
So with all the misinformation online, I've been seeing like some people painting corn and like wheat as the villains. Can you like shed some light on that, why that's not true and why they're actually good?
Yeah, so the number one thing, people tend to kind of point the finger at corn and wheat and all of those grains as a problem with allergies, which couldn't be further from the truth. So actually grain allergies are extremely rare. There's only really one breed of dog that is known to have an issue with grains, particularly wheat. So it's about 1% of all allergies, and a lot of breeders have actually been able to breed that out of Irish setters.
Oh, okay.
So even then, it's even kind of rare for Irish setters to have that problem now. So I think that's kind of part of where it all started, where people started thinking, oh, gluten is bad, wheat is bad. And then with corn, again, corn is such a great nutritional, like,
they say it's a filler, like a cheap filler.
And that's the thing, like, I just honestly, I don't understand why people label it as something that's low nutritional value, because it's so rich in protein and amino acids. It's got like the highest concentration of linoleic acid out of anything you can get.
Which is very important, you know, for their skin
yeah,
and everything.
yeah, exactly. So basically it's an essential fatty acid, and it's actually quite common for puppies to have a linoleic acid deficiency, especially if they're being fed a diet that is not a commercial diet. So if they're being fed a homemade diet and they're not adding any sort of oil supplement, they're probably missing out on linoleic acid. So if you see a puppy or a dog even with really bad dandruff, generally it's actually a linoleic acid deficiency.
So they need corn.
They need corn. They need it.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing is too is that with corn, the reason it's usually added into pet food is also so that they get the full nutrient profile of all of the protein. So even though you've got meat present in the diet, any form of meat is still only going to give you, you know, that nutrient profile that meat has. So you're going to miss out on some amino acids. So what they do is they add a plant-based protein into the diet to make sure that you get kind of the other half of that profile.
Okay.
It's not normally found in a meat-based protein.
So you can't just, you know, like people say they want high protein and they care about the meat being the main ingredient, but actually you need to think about vegetable proteins as well to have that balanced nutrient profile.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. What do you say to clients if they say, you know, can my dog or cat be vegetarian?
So, I mean, when they say it about cats, honestly, I just tell them no. It's just, I mean, they need taurine. Let's just put it out there. They need taurine. You can't get taurine from plant material. So any vegetarian or vegan diet for a cat is going to be deficient, and it's going to need taurine added, which is not going to make it a vegan or vegetarian diet because it contains a meat source, right? So so with cats, I tell people to just forget it, just don't do it. Also, in some countries, it is actually an animal cruelty offense to feed your cat a vegan or vegetarian diet because, as we know, it's actually a deficient diet, so it can be perceived as cruelty. For dog owners, some people, it is actually okay to feed a vegetarian diet to dogs. The reason that is because dogs are actually omnivores. They're not carnivores. So many people think that they're actually carnivores or facultative carnivores, but they're actually omnivores like humans. So they can still get a lot of the nutrients they need from a plant-based protein. So the main diets I tell people when they're looking for a vegetarian diet is to get something that's actually been trialed though. So get something that is from a brand that is available from your vet clinic and has been heavily trialed and tested and formulated to be vegetarian and to be safe for your pet. Because unfortunately, a lot of the vegan and vegetarian diets that are for dogs that are popping up online or are popping up in pet stores have not been trialed. And some of them have been linked to recalls and severe illness over here in Australia. So again, I tell people you need to look for a diet that generally they're hypoallergenic diets because dogs or cats, they can have allergies to meat proteins. So diets that don't contain meat are obviously generally a hypoallergenic diet. So
dogs tend to get allergies with meat proteins compared to like the corn and wheat that you said. It's more common for meat, is it?
Exactly, yeah. So it's based, sorry.
Oh no, is there like specific type? Is there like, I remember learning in vet school, there was like a ranking of like meats, like which is the most common and like the least common.
Yeah, exactly. So kind of varies actually depending on where you are in the world because it's based on what access you have to those meat proteins and how exposed your pet has been. So I know that in here and I believe in the US, it's chicken is the number one, beef is number two, and number three depends where you are. So here it's generally lamb, and I think in the UK it's actually fish. So it just depends what they've got more access to. But usually fish and lamb are either third or fourth.
But to identify the allergen in your diet, you have to go on a diet trial. And then you have to go for a diet trial for like, was it 3 to 4 weeks? Like a substantial amount of time. You can't just go on 1 week and be like, I've done it. No.
Yeah, no.
You have to do it for longer periods.
Yeah, and I do get a lot of clients that think like, oh, I changed the diet, it's fixed now. And I'm like, sorry, kind of got like 12 weeks to go. Because it's sort of like, you have an 8-week dietary sort of exclusion period where they're just
Okay.
feeding that hypoallergenic food. And then you're supposed to
Yeah.
do 2 weekly challenges. So every
Oh.
fortnight you challenge with something. So usually a meat protein. So you might try chicken. So might give them a little bit of chicken, and then you watch them for 2 weeks. So you actually
Okay.
don't continue to feed it. You just give them a bit of chicken and then watch them, because they can have a delayed
Okay.
reaction.
So you give them chicken, let's say on day 1, but then you continue feeding them the hypoallergenic diet.
Yep.
For the
So
2
that
weeks,
you
and
know
then
that
see
it's
what
only
happens.
been that exposure that's caused the issue.
Ah, okay.
You do a series of those, and then once you've established what was causing the problem, then you go onto a diet that's either continued to be hypoallergenic if they're exposed to a lot of things, or you go into a food that doesn't contain that issue.
So just to let you know that I've got a lot of pre-vet students on this channel, and I think it would be very beneficial for them, to learn a bit more about your career and how they can go about achieving your qualifications or working towards, veterinary nutrition field sort of area.
Yeah, definitely. So I suppose if they want to do what I did, which was a bit random, when you do your pre-vet degree, obviously you're still going to have your electives. So always choose things that you actually enjoy. And if it is nutrition, that's one of those things, choose electives around nutrition. So not necessarily just your nutrition subjects. My course was very agricultural based. So there was a lot of stuff that was based around animal welfare, meat processing, how they actually figure out and supplement animals' diets to produce better meat or things like that. And biochemistry, I did a lot of biochemistry, probably more than I would like to admit, or that I enjoyed. So I did a lot of biochemistry and physiology as well, which kind of gives you that base knowledge going forward into a nutrition course. Basically, if you want to go into nutrition from pre-vet, pick nutrition subjects, but also pick your physiology subjects and the boring stuff, because it is actually more beneficial than you thought it would be. The other thing is try and get as much experience. I know they're probably sick of hearing this, but it is really important to try and get experience. If it's pet nutrition that you want to go into, like cats and dogs, it might seem stupid, but try and get jobs in pet stores, because I learned massive amounts of nutrition from pet stores, even though majority of it was marketing jargon, but I did learn a lot of actual good information from that. Try and get some farming experience too, meat and dairy and that sort of stuff, because you do learn a lot of nutrition in that, rather than I suppose the production side of things. It's more the nutrition you learn from it that I found really, really useful.
Like what goes into the feed and, how to decide the composition of the feed.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing is as well is that I think people forget, because they kind of are too busy looking at the meat side of things, they forget that it's actually the nutrition that it starts from that's more important. Because particularly now with the move away from antibiotics and that sort of type of farming, farmers are really, really desperate for that type of knowledge on well, how do I know that my cows are getting the best grass that they can produce, the best milk? Because I would never have thought that that was actually most of what they deal with, is supplementing your soil and your grass to produce better nutrition, rather than actually feeding the cow.
Yeah, it's really cool that nutrition encompasses, how do you pronounce nutrition involves a lot of other things besides just the main animal. Yeah.
And I think that's where vets, I think, get worried that they don't know enough nutrition to talk to people. And I'm you know more than you think, because you've had to take all of these subjects that are probably more nutrition based than your nutrition subject. So just try and think of the background. Don't get too worked up that, I only did one nutrition subject. No, you did 20 nutrition subjects. Every subject is a nutrition subject.
You just didn't know about it.
You just didn't know. Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, thanks so much, Jessica. So what is your day-to-day job now, and alongside Nutrition RVN, and how do you balance between the two?
Yeah, so I have a busy life. So I work full-time, and I'm actually a practice manager. So I manage a small animal clinic here in Victoria, in Australia. And we are busy. And so my day-to-day job, I suppose, is kind of, I would say maybe 90% nursing and like 10% management, just because like we're so understaffed at the moment. So I do a lot of nursing, and then in between that, I do managing the clinic. And then once I get home, I jump into Nutrition RVN and I write my blogs, or I do calls like this, or I educate people, or create, you know, documents for people, and consult. I have my consultations as well that I run outside of work as well.
That's so amazing that you do so many things.
I do too many things.
Well, make sure you take care of yourself as well, amongst doing so many things. But yeah, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for watching this video. Stay tuned for more videos like this. Okay, bye.